Hey, good afternoon. It's just gone 4 o'clock London time, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to the UK Israel Business HealthTech Forum. It's the first time we've done this in an online format. I'm used to looking at a room full of people as I welcome you to this event, but obviously times are different and needs must. One of the things we're doing today to try and recreate the atmosphere as much as we can is our cocktail partnership with Neo Cocktails. Now, as much as I'd love to be able to show you my cocktail, unfortunately, Royal Mail don't deliver where I am, so I'm just going to say cheers to you with a glass of water. But hopefully, at least some of you have got some drinks. I can see one or two do. So, of our panelists have drinks, and hopefully, those of you at home watching this also do. In terms of logistics, we're going to have each speaker present for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll do Q&A with each speaker. Now, what we've set up is the Zoom Q&A, and you also have the ability to raise your hand as well. So what I would encourage is to type your questions as we go, and then you can also raise hands and we'll give you the chance to speak. So we'll try and keep this as close as normal to the format of our normal health tech forums. To start off, I'd actually like to introduce Amir Blatt, who's a partner at Accelmed, who's going to speak first. So Amir, hopefully you can share your screen with us, and then it's yours. If you could try that.
It says I can't share my screen while the other participant is sharing.
Okay, so I've now stopped my share. I do hope you'll forgive us with any sort of teething issues as we go with this. We're all learning how to do these sort of live events. Okay.
So, just that, sorry. Okay. Does everyone see my screen? Yeah. Okay. So, nice to meet you all over Zoom. I was supposed to be here in person, but unfortunately, that would have to be delayed. I'm a partner at Accelmed. I've been with the company for 10 years now. I actually joined the fund 1 year after it was funded. By background, I'm a biotechnology engineer. I sold diagnostics right after school, in vitro diagnostics. Later on, I went to investment banking, and then I joined the group. Accelmed started as the investment arm of Mori Arkin. He's one of the most prominent life science investors in Israel. Made his fortune in pharmaceuticals. He has a pharma fund, a hedge fund that deals with life sciences, and we started as the medical device arm. With time, we expanded into digital health, and we became a fund with additional institutional investors. And actually, these days, our second fund ended its investment period last year, end of 19. And we moved on to investing out of two separate funds. One fund is going to be based in New York that is going to invest in more mature companies with sales of $10 million and above. And the other fund is Accelmed Ventures, which I'm a partner of together with Dr. Irit Yaniv. And that fund is going to invest in younger companies that are pre-sales or have sales of a few millions. The first investment of this fund was in diagnostic robotics that Kira from the company is going to speak later on. And I'm actually very proud that they took a leading role with leading the solutions for this crisis. So when I was invited to speak, I don't have a company, so we have 15 companies in our portfolio, in different, in various fields. Young companies that are first in human, and more mature companies that sell $50 million and are based in the US. All of them were affected, obviously. And I wanted to give you some kind of a breakdown on what's going on here in Israel, and focusing more on the diagnostics and monitoring point of view, and then to share my 2 cents on where the world is going and how it's going to look, because that's how I need to think as an investor. So there was a lot of collaboration going on between the government, the universities, industry, large and small companies, there were a lot of nice initiatives from enabling to find solutions for ventilating machines to diagnostics and etc. The Ministry of Defense here took a leading role in securing equipment, medical equipment from all around the world, and they're actually helping also with they gave their engineers and developers to industry companies to help to be another force that they would be able to use, and they're actually as an office that is used to deal with the crises, they are helping to manage this whole thing. The high-tech industry has also came up to the challenge, and we see even, it's obvious that the companies that have products that are related to Corona would flourish, but we also see companies that are not really related, such as, companies that develop computer chips on normal days, and their CEOs are dealing with finding equipment and gears from their vendors in China and other parts of the world. And we're seeing a lot of movement towards remote monitoring for Corona patients and non-Corona patients. Regulation barriers has been cut down, and there's one company I'm involved with that started 5 different pilots in the past couple of weeks. It's just, it's pretty amazing. And I brought some examples of what has been going on. So Sight will be speaking right after me, and Diagnostic Robotics can also tell you about the amazing things that they are doing. But I wanted to elaborate a little bit about 8400. That's an organization that I'm a member of. It's basically a network that the idea is to connect government officials, hospital managers, executives from the HMOs here, large companies such as the CEO of Philips Israel, as well as small startups, and researchers from the universities to be some kind of to take a leading role in the ecosystem here and take the Israeli ecosystem forward. This organization started working together with the Ministry of Health. They assembled 2 different task forces, and they came up with very nice initiatives, such as there's one example is from yesterday. It's pharmaceutical companies, Roche and Abbott, collaborating with the HMOs, Clalit and Maccabi, and together with the regulator to remove barriers and to provide home treatment to cancer patients, to provide chemo and all the staff that comes with it, together with the diagnostics that comes with it. So that's an example that I like. Another anecdotal example is MyHeritage, that in normal days map family trees. Basically, the company is now trying to start a lab to test for Corona. This is a map that was made by Startup Nation Central that just it gives you some kind of an idea of the movement that was done here in the past months and a half by companies in different fields. And actually, I think you can add some more names to this list. I'm getting ideas almost on a daily basis from companies. Thinking about the future, so we need to start from the past. So diagnostic was less favorable by investors in the past. We as investors, at least, usually try to seek for therapeutical solutions. It's not that we didn't invest in diagnostics. We actually sold a diagnostic company last week, a company we invested in 10 years ago. And remote monitoring is a bit different. I'm relating more to the classic diagnostics. But I think that the world has changed, and we need to acknowledge that. And we need to review our own perceptions. As an investor, the companies I invest in today, the investment horizon is usually between 3 to 5 years. So these are the time frames that I'm thinking of usually. So to think about what's going on today, it doesn't really help me. Right now we're at a state of trauma, a state of shock, and we see all sorts of immediate solutions that some of them are not going to stay with us, but some will. And there are two periods, that are going to start hopefully very soon. There's going to be a transition period until they're going to find a vaccine. According to experts, that's going to be between 1 to 2 years. During that period, we will have to monitor the population for future outbreaks, like we see now in Asia, and we'll have to find solutions for that. We'll have to find solutions to allow people to transport and to get together in open venues to some extent. Remote ICUs and hospitals at home, that's a trend that already started before the Corona crisis, but now we understand that we can't really be, even if we will build the additional hospitals, we won't have the manpower to fill them with. So I think it's going to grow more and more, and we'll have to keep supporting the non-corona patients. A lot of people die from coronaphobia. People that are at the potential of getting a stroke or a heart attack. In many cases, they delay their arrival to the hospital because they're afraid of being infected of the corona. I heard it from a lot of people that are in the hospitals that they say that their wards are empty. The neurology and the cardiology, it's less occupied than normal times. And the clinical trials that have gone almost completely on hold will have to get back and doing them. People will be afraid to go to the hospital, and because they'll be afraid to get infected, and we'll have to find a solution to do it from afar. I'm already starting to see the pharmaceutical companies doing it, and they were allowed, actually, some of our companies got exempt by the FDA to do it, that instead of going to the clinic for a follow-up, they can do it remotely, and that comes together with diagnostics, obviously. Hopefully, after this nightmare is going to end, the trauma is going to stay, and I guess governments will have the attention to tools that could monitor mass populations for future outbreaks, because we can't really afford as a global economy to have such a crisis again. relying on internal vendors, diagnostics suddenly became a national security issue. We see countries that are blocking exports out of their borders to other countries. So that's going to be a big issue. And you remember the trends before the corona, home care? That's still there. I mean, all the trends that began before the corona, way before the corona, the digital health, that definition started when I started. It used to be called the healthcare IT, but about eight years ago, it was people started to call it the digital health. All these trends are gonna stay, and I think they're gonna get increased, actually, enhanced. So I took some examples of companies on this spectrum that represent this spectrum. So obviously diagnostic robotics and Title Care are on the remote monitoring side, but there are very interesting technologies that are that are now emerging and are actually enhancing because of this crisis. Vocalis Health it's a company that monitors diagnostics through voice. In regular days, they monitor CHF patients, and now they are monitoring the deterioration of corona patients, and even to detect it before people get diagnosed by blood samples. Netira, it's a company that basically can monitor vital signs without touching the patient. That's I'm talking about heart rate, respiratory rate, and etc. If we're looking at point of care and rapid tests are going to be a big thing. So Sight is sitting right on that circle. Mime, that's another Israeli interesting company that can diagnose if you got a virus or not, point of care. And on the right side, all the domestic suppliers that were boring companies, were used to perceived by investors are suddenly perceived as very hot companies. Novamed, that's a company that has been around for the past 30 years. And they developed a rapid test they are developing now a rapid home test for corona together with BATM that is traded on the British exchange. And on regular days, they got home tests to identify risk of a heart attack. And I see that this trend only growing. So these are my 2 cents, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Amir. I see we've got a question from Anna Bays. So Anna, I'm going to allow you to talk so you can ask your question. Anna? Okay. Sorry, Anna, did you have a question, Anna? Okay, if we have any other questions, do please either type them and we'll see them, or raise your hand and we'll give you the ability to speak as well. Okay, Tal Hebitz has asked a question as well. Tal, hopefully you should be able to talk now if you unmute yourself.
I see a question from Robert Weider.
Okay.
About mortality rates in Israel compared to other countries.
So yes, do you want to answer that first, and then we'll give Tal the chance to speak?
Yeah. I don't have a really good answer because there are a lot of variants between the countries. You see that Germany, for example, also has a very low mortality rate. It's, part of the reason is that the population here is considered to be younger than European countries. And you know, there's actually a pretty good healthcare system here. I mean, all this collaboration that I described earlier on, the fact that we got HMOs that have hospitals, they have clinics, remote clinics. They have we have technology implemented here for 2 decades now. In tools like diagnostic robotics, for example, that were implemented to try and identify outbreaks before they happen. I think these are part of the factors that that brought it to this state, and I hope it will remain.
Okay, Tal, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, so I come from primary care background and a bit of digital as well. Really curious to see how here in the UK we not ready with remote monitoring. So when you mentioned, I think, Natira, I'm quite interested to know whether people are using in Israel technologies that were already in place with those patients. All of a sudden we need to monitor them remotely, or otherwise it's just a good idea that's not implemented yet, because at the moment, you know, we're talking here about things like how do we circulate around in the community pulse oximeters, blood pressure monitoring, various different things that are very tricky nowadays, especially when you don't want to risk the teams that are dealing with those patients with potential risk of infection themselves. So just curious about that. How is it working in Israel?
Okay, so it started in waves. So obviously, we started from the approved products, such as Sight is being used at leading hospitals to monitor corona patients, but also vital signs, like companies like BioBeat that has been approved by the FDA. It's a bracelet that has been approved by the FDA just a month and a half ago. That tracks SpO2 and I think it's SpO2, heart rate for sure, and then blood flow, continuous blood flow. TytoCare, that was already approved. That's a company that basically in normal days it's used to monitor, to help parents monitor their kids instead of going to the clinic. They can talk with the doctor online that checks their ear, their throat, checks their temperature. We started from that. And then they ran out of supply very quickly. I'm working with a company called Novolog that is they're a service provider that in normal days they monitor ventilated patients. And when I connected them with these companies, then they just didn't have enough equipment to hand them. So that's in favor of the regulator here. So the other companies that were a bit earlier in their state of development started expediting their development. As I said, the army even is helping some of the companies to minimize the technological gaps, and the regulator provided expedited approvals to start pilots with these companies, and Novolog started 5 different pilots in 2 weeks, which is pretty amazing. And not to mention that their providers are more open to conduct these pilots together with them. So, you know, there are some providers that I'm talking about even home cares and places like that In the past, they were very anti-technology, and now they figure out that they don't really have a choice. So that's what I see.
Okay, Amir, we've obviously had quite a few questions asked now. So should we just, we've only got probably 2 or 3 more minutes before we hand over to Kira. So do you want to maybe take Ash's question, then Ben, then Ian's, and then Liz has asked a couple of questions on the chat as well. So if we start in that order with Ash first.
Okay,
So
I'm
Ash's
just reading it as we speak.
Hi, this
how
is
do you
Ash
guys...
from Ops and Ventures. One day coronavirus will be over. How do you guys think about getting the balance right between leaning into helping out on COVID-19 versus other use cases that may have more value longer term?
That's a good question. So, you know, it's right now the way I see it, that we're in a, we need to find a solution. We need to find a solution. It's not really it's not even a business issue. All of the companies that are going to speak right after me, obviously, they're not doing it for the money, like in normal days. Also, in normal days, you want to help the world, but you also want to create profit. And right now, we're trying to find solutions as fast as possible. When I was approached to invest in companies that found solutions for Corona that I think that will not stay after the Corona or will not be so needed, I gently guided them towards philanthropists that can help them. At the end of the day, I'm a fund and I need to provide the return rates to my investors. And we would focus on, once we get out of the crisis, we would come back to focus on the value creation, like in normal days.
Okay, shall we take Ben Judah's question next? That is, I'd be interested to hear how earlier stage companies are able to successfully rapidly scale up to their commercialization strategies, especially in a market with many established players, as well as numerous disruptive earlier stage companies operating.
So this is the exact timing for such companies to move forward. There's so much business going on, actually worldwide, that some of our companies are getting approached from all over the world that this is exactly the right timing for young companies to charge ahead. It depends on the stage of the company. Of course, the company needs to have a close to market ready product. I'm saying even close to market ready. It doesn't have to be market ready. And they can go towards a pilot. And how, the question on how, it's obviously their investors should help them, but also here, or at least here, there's the Israeli Innovation Authority that is helping the companies to reach the right people. There's the organization that I mentioned before, 8400, that part of its role is to connect the dots. So I think it's actually more of an opportunity for these type of companies. If they have a solution that is related to this crisis, it's actually an opportunity for them.
Okay, I'll just, if we can maybe keep this quite quick now in terms of Ian Kay's question, I'd like to ask a more general question about investment. Can you share some insights on key elements you're looking for when assessing an investment?
So number one is the team. I was asked to talk about also on why I invested in diagnostic robotics before Corona. So there were 2 reasons. One reason is that I like their approach, their solution. Basically, what they do in normal days, they have an automated triage solution that keeps patients at home or going to urgent care instead of the ER. But the major reason was the team. The fact that I saw that we've been in touch for 3 years, and when they first approached me, we chose not to proceed with the investment, and they made a very nice pivot and a very nice advancement on how they see the world, and they, you know, that's what I like. That's what you need in these type of companies, and they proven that in this crisis, because they came up with a product in no time that is now being used nationwide here in Israel, and is going to be used in other places in the world, such as India and the United States. So this is the main thing that you look in the company. Obviously, all the regular stuff, you know, technology, market size, IP, but the top factor for me is the team.
Okay, and I'm now going to ask Liz Lightstone to ask her question. So Liz, hopefully you should be able to speak now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm a nephrologist. 2 questions, one very general and one more specific. So what I can't see with Israel's really strict lockdown is how you ever get out of it, because at some point this virus has to go through the community. So I wondered what your view was. And more specifically, what's troubled us in the kidney world is that although we can do remote consultations and all of that quite easily on our very large groups of patients, they still need blood tests. And what we really need is better point of care diagnostics for potassium, creatinines, urine dips. And have you got pipelines of that developing in Israel?
Thank you, Liz.
Okay, so as for the exit strategy, we'll have Kira will talk about the diagnostics robotic solution, but basically they created a heat map that can track outbreaks before they happen, and then I guess that one of the tools that the government is going to use is to if they see that there's an outbreak that's going to start in a specific city, they're going to lock down this specific city, and instead of locking down the entire country. They'll have to use more diagnostic tests. They're now talking about getting to 20,000 tests a month. I don't know if if they'll be able to reach it, but the more tests we're going to have, the more intelligence we're going to have about the situation, and then it's going to be more manageable. As for a point of care, so the test, so it depends on the patient, right? So if it's a cancer patient that, like I described before, that is getting chemo at home, then yeah, you need the point of care right on the spot. But in a lot of cases, you know, you can use a central lab. You can over here, if you do that's usually you get the results within a few hours from the central lab, because it's all computerized in normal days. They'll have to build some kind of an algorithm that they can monitor these patients, maybe to send a messenger or a nurse to take some blood tests and then run them into the main lab. And then these patients, and then that's how you can monitor these patients. Solutions like companies like Novolog they're also handling kidney patients in normal days. So they should collaborate with these type of solutions, and they have the ability. Their specialty is logistics. So it's more of a logistic issue, if you ask me, because we're a small country. It's mostly a logistic issue than a technological challenge.
Okay, I would argue it would transform outpatients if patients could monitor themselves more readily. I mean, not just during COVID, but all our renal patients mostly are supposed to be shielded at home. And we currently have to ask them to come in and have bloods taken, which is slightly absurd. But in a general thing going forward, we're very comfortable now with video consultations and remote consultations, but we need to know what their bloods are. And I think for some of the things, we don't need full bloods every time, but we need to know certain parameters are safe on the drugs that we're doing.
Yeah, but if you can send them a nurse to you know, I don't know if we have this, I don't know, yeah, maybe we do, but I don't know if we have all of these specific type of blood tests in a point of care form.
Logistically, a home nurse doesn't work. I mean, we're looking after thousands of patients.
Yeah, but again, because we're a small country, we have the advantage of being a small country.
Yeah.
Novolog Novolog and other competing companies have teams of nurses that are doing it. Today, there are pilots actually being formed today that answer these needs. So that's why I'm saying it's a matter of logistics here, not in the UK.
Yeah.
Because the population size and also the population spread is something that we can cope with.
Thank you.
You're on mute.
Amir, thank you very much indeed. And yes, you're right, I was on mute. We're now going to look from Sight Diagnostics. So Solene, if you could share your screen, you should be able to put your presentation up. And I think you're currently on mute at the moment. Okay, I've unmuted you.
Can you hear me now?
We can, yes. If you put that into presentation mode, that would be the best way to...
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
Can you see the screen and hear me? Brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you very much for having us today. My name is Solene. I'm the UK General Manager for Sight Diagnostics, and with me today is Assi, who will be here to join the discussion. Assi is our Chief Commercial Officer. So let me start by introducing Sight. Sight was founded about 10 years ago with the idea of revolutionizing blood testing. So what we developed is a technology that is basically capable of taking pictures of blood using digital microscopy, and then using AI algorithm to diagnose what's in the blood. So it was first launched on a device that is called Parasite for malaria treatment, and we sold more than 1 million tests, and Parasite is accepted as the gold standard for malaria testing. More recently, this was implemented on Olo, which is a platform that is currently able to do full blood count, but in the future, we hope to do much more than this. Before diving into what Sight does and Olo, I want to take a step back and look at 3 trends which we're seeing as completely changing healthcare and diagnostic, and which Olo plays a role in. The first one, obvious one that was mentioned by Amir, is digitization. Technology is changing markets around the world, and what we're particularly excited by at Sight is the ability to gather data on a large scale and be able to draw new insights from it and new innovations on problems that were never solved before. The second one is decentralization. As healthcare systems around the world are being put under increasing pressure to deliver better care with less resources, decentralization is one of the ways of pushing care away from the most costly setting closer to patients. And the last one is consumerization. As patients, we're increasingly behaving like consumers. We want to be in control of our healthcare data, in control of the decision, and we want to be given the tools to make those decisions. So all of those trends, as we discussed before, I think the 2 previous discussions are an example of how this is just accelerating in the current situation with COVID. Now let's take a closer look at what Sight does, which is diagnostic. I'll give you a simple example of the last time I needed a blood test. I live in London in the UK, and I was feeling really tired, and I know I'm prone to anemia, so I needed to get a blood test. the first step obviously was to book an appointment with my GP. Went to the GP. He didn't have the ability to take a blood test on site, so I was referred to a hospital. Over there, I had to wait for a few hours to get a blood test. I got my blood test with a needle, which I hate, but it was fine. And then my test was sent, and I got the results 4 days after. I had anemia, and I was prescribed tabs of iron. This is a simple problem, right? But think about how inconvenient, slow, and costly it was for the system. I was lucky it wasn't an acute situation, but the test that I needed was a full blood count. And full blood count is actually the most commonly ordered blood test in the world. So my situation and the complication with getting a full blood count is not unique. A full blood count, I'm sure as many of you know, tests for white blood cells, red blood cells, and platelets. And it's used in a range of diagnostic and treatment, including tracking the progression of infection, monitoring cancer patients before chemotherapy, managing side effects of different drugs, etc., etc. And despite being the most commonly ordered blood test in the world, it's a test that is still mostly done in central labs. And the reason for that is purely technological. The technology that currently does full blood count is called flow cytometry. So it's basically tubes with a lot of blood and reagents flowing through it. And managing equipment that can do this requires a lot of training and maintenance, etc. So that's why it's being done in a lab. There has been some attempts to bring this technology closer to patients. However, it has just meant taking the same technology and shrinking it. And it hasn't been really successful at scale because it has compromised on accuracy of results, but it's also as challenging to manage. And this is why HOLO is a true revolution for the market. It uses a completely different technology. We take pictures of blood and use algorithm to count the different cells in the blood. And this makes us the first lab-grade full blood count analyzer that is truly designed for point of care. And I'll go in detail about what I mean by those facts right now. So first and foremost, we're lab grade. So we give the same breadth of results as lab equipment. A 5-part diff, many different parameters, and advanced abnormality flagging. In addition, we're as accurate as lab equipment. The graphs that I'm showing here are from our FDA 510K clearance, where we demonstrated that we were significantly equivalent to the Sysmex XN, one of the most commonly used lab equipment, for any type of patient, including patients that have very low counts or abnormal samples, but also for anyone above 3 months. And we were also authorized for finger prick. And we're the only analyzer in the market that has been authorized for finger prick. Now, talking about why we're truly designed for point of care at the contrary of other equipments out there. The HOLO comes factory calibrated. It is installed, and once installed, you only need minimal training to learn how to use it. Users don't have to do any maintenance. There's automatic QC, and there's mechanisms in place to ensure that the results given are always accurate. And in case anything goes wrong, we have the ability to remotely service and support any clinical staff. So talking about how easy it is to use, let me just share with you a quick demonstration of how what it takes to basically get your results. It's 3 very simple steps. The first one is you just need 2 drops of blood from a finger prick or from a venous sample. You put them in a cartridge, you put the cartridge inside of the HOLO, and within 10 minutes, you get your results that you can share in many different ways, however you want. So I have a quick video to show you of how this is done in practice. Let's test how it works with everyone's connection. Worst case, you can find it on YouTube. So let me just give it a try.
Sample 2 easy steps and 2 drops from either the fingertip or a venous sample. 1 drop is placed directly into the cartridge, and the second is mixed and added. With the sample ready, the cartridge is loaded into the OLO instrument's automated scanner. Within 10 minutes, results are ready on the touchscreen and can be printed, emailed, or sent to a lab information system. Sight, the future of blood diagnostics is here.
Great. So hopefully this came through. As you can see in the video, it takes 10 minutes to get your results. So I just want to give you a sense of what happens inside of the OLO during those 10 minutes. So we take thousands and thousands of pictures, in fact, 6 gigabytes of data. And as you can see, we see very rich images, much richer than anyone has collected before. So that gives us the ability to do full blood counts, detect malaria, but many more possibilities in the future, and that's something we're really excited about. So we've talked about the technology, and now I want to talk about the impact that we can have on patients, and in this current situation as well. We've said that OLO can help with a variety of treatment, from diagnostic to managing patients with long-term condition to monitoring patient long-term health. And we're actually getting a lot of demand in this situation. So we're responding to a lot of inbound demand. And we believe at Sight that the OLO can be really impactful as well in this situation of COVID, given that CBC, full blood count, is one of the tests that is crucial for both the diagnosis of COVID patients, but also monitoring how their situation is progressing. So as a few examples of what we've done, we have an OLO that has been placed in a quarantine lab. I think Amir mentioned it before, in Sheba, in Israel. And over there, we're basically avoiding cross-contamination using the OLO and running the blood on the OLO. OLO can also be used for triaging patients, and we are installing an OLO in an integrated care center in the UK this week to help in a COVID triage setting in the community. And with all of that happening, as Amir mentioned, there's a lot of work that is being done to continue to treat vulnerable patients, non-COVID patients, and while protecting them from COVID. And we're doing some work as well in Israel with some hospitals to basically be able to put OLO in a car and be able to treat in the community cancer patients that need chemotherapy. On top of all of that, we're also gathering data and images of COVID patients to develop a severity index to be able to better understand COVID and help patients. So it's a severity index that would help us understand how severe COVID is for someone. So if you feel like OLO could benefit in any clinical setting, both in the COVID situation or not, or if you'd be interested in collaborating on our research, we're looking for research partners, or if you have any questions in general, more than happy to discuss now or for you to get in touch later on.
Well, thank you very much, Solene. As the previous presenters, if you have questions, do please either raise your hand or type them in the Q&A section or chat. In the meantime, whilst we're waiting for questions, I would like to once again thank our long-term sponsors of the HealthTech Forum, Odgers Bernstad, and Clifford Chance as well, for helping us continue to run these forums. So we have a question from Pip Hodgson. Actually, it's 3 questions. What CE certification have you got? How does OLO read control serum levels? I.e., if a user squeezes their finger often, this pushes out higher serum levels rather than blood. And 3, what other tests other than FBC can you do? So,
great, thanks. I probably need to see this question written because there's quite a few in one question.
Can you see that in the Q&A section?
Solene, I heard it, so I'm happy to pick those questions up.
Thank you.
We have a certification that it allows us to place it. Sorry, I now have kids joining. So my apologies. But We have CE certification from June last year. Please, no interruption, okay? You can sit with me, but don't go crazy. We have FDA from 3 months ago. I want to be very explicit. In Europe, with our CE mark, we're allowed to place it anywhere. So in the community settings, in a pharmacy, etc. In the US, our current approval is a moderately complex 510K, which means we're allowed to place it in CLIA certified labs only. And we're aiming for further approvals in time. So that's on the kind of regulatory side of things. How do you read serum levels? So there's guidelines on how to do a finger prick. We have some control of what you put in it and are able to see things that are abnormal. But if you, for instance, one of the things you're supposed to do when you do a finger prick is wipe the first drop off, not squeeze it, etc., to ensure that the blood you're getting from a finger is equivalent to venous blood. If people go nuts and really try to confuse an analyzer, it's hard, but there are things that could be done to trick even a very robust platform. But we haven't seen any challenges with that to date. On the types of tests we do, we are taking a very, very safe and scientific approach to releasing tests. So I want to first clarify, we did one analyzer that did malaria. Olo today is received regulatory approval for a full blood count or a complete blood count as it's stated elsewhere. We have the ability to do some additional tests already. For instance, we know we've run a research with the US military to prove that we can run on the same sample CBC and malaria. And then there are additional tests that could be coming. A good way to think about it is anything that could be done with a person in a microscope is a likely candidate to be a test that the Olo could do in the future.
Okay, we have a few more questions. From Miles Furness, are you looking to measure antibody levels?
At the moment, we don't. We are considering different changes to the sample prep, which will allow us to read antibodies. At the moment, we're not doing anything like that. We're really focused on, again, launched, for example, in the US 3 months ago, very focused on successful launch of a CBC analyzer, an FBC analyzer in the UK.
From Liz Lightstone, what sort of cost is the machine and the cartridges? And to reduce pinpricks, might well want to say check a blood glucose at similar time, but not do separate finger prick.
So you maybe on the second question first, you can use the same prick from multiple analyzers that could work with a finger prick. So a glucose meter or a CRP or a lateral flow test for COVID are very sensible things that you could do as part of a triage or with a finger prick. Then on a cost, the cost is really dependent on the clinical setting and the volumes that are run, and we don't tend to discuss those publicly.
Okay.
To have a specific discussion with any institution anytime.
Thank you. Gil Raby has a question as well. Impressive technology. Interested how you have managed the perception of a Theranos effect. Has it helped or hindered your cause?
Yes. I think that in the UK at least, because that's my perspective from a UK perspective, I would say that Theranos has given people the ability to think about what could be possible. But in general, it's not something that comes up this much. Laboratories and hospitals in the UK are very rigorous in their validation process of the Olo before adopting any technology, and so are we. So we've been going through all the required steps, etc. And as soon as people see the Olo in action versus their lab equipment, they immediately get it and are very impressed with the technology. So it hasn't really been something that we encounter that much, at least in the UK.
And then I think Solene's answer is valid throughout the world. The one thing I would add is investors are a different beast. So clinicians are data-driven. Investors, and sorry, Amir is a unique a different case of an actually rational investor, but investors are very rarely driven by pure reason and fact. And therefore, with investors, we've had highs and lows around Theranos. It either scares them or excites them, but not always consistently in a purely rational way.
That, I think, is it in terms of the questions. What I would like to say is a huge thank you to everyone for your time, from our presenters in particular for giving your time to be with us, and also obviously to all of you for being here on this webinar with us, and for engaging so much as well. I know it's not quite the same as all being in a room together, meeting physically and asking questions, but I hope that thanks to the Neo cocktail, you've been able to at least enjoy a drink and have at least something to replicate the real world that we used to know. And I hope very much we'll be back to do this physically soon. But in the meantime, we will be doing more of these webinars, and do please keep an eye out for them. Also, thank you to our sponsors, Clifford Chance and Odges, for their ongoing support again. And with that, I think I will close the webinar. So thank you all very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Chag Sameach.